It's my traditional end-of-year top 5 phones, kept quite brief here since I covered a lot of the background to this list in the previous show, number 382. And as usual, I factor in value as well as absolute functionality and future-proofing. I'm ignoring the second-hand market, by the way. You'll have your own favourite route, whether it's stores like CEX in the UK, online auction sites, or closed forums like PSE Classifieds on MeWe. I can't emphasise this enough. Buying last year's flagship today is, as always, always going to deliver the best bang per buck, as it were. In fact, of the 10 smartphones I've bought in the last decade, not counting PR loans, 9 of them were purchased second-hand months after launch. But this top 5 is understandably about phones all still sold new at decent profile. Bubbling under are a few Chinese phones of note. The Xiaomi Mi Note 10, as later in this show you'll see it, and the Mi 90 Pro currently with Mr. Ted Salmon, the Huawei P30 Pro still around, all very interesting camera phones. I'd even give a shout out to oddities like the Samsung Galaxy Fold and the Cosmo Communicator, even though I couldn't possibly recommend a general user to go and buy one. This, the G7 Plus, was in my May top 5. The cheapest phone by miles there, and it's now down to around £170 if you shop around, which is astonishing value. Loud stereo speakers, Dolby Atmos, a quality OIS-equipped large sensored camera, audio jack, expandable storage, and everything else you might expect. See my review in Phone Show 362. And now there's a G8 Plus too, though I haven't had hands on at £250 or so in the UK, adding a faster chipset, bigger battery, and a wide angle and a 48 megapixel pixel binned main camera. Though you do lose the OIS for low light shots from this G7 Plus, and that's a shame. Your choice anyway, see what you can find in the usual places. I do seem to always be able to recommend one of the Moto G models though, they're such great value. This, by the way, this is my aftermarket Qi add-on under a TPU case. It works really, really well. It just looks horrible. As usual with Pixels, there are 2 sizes. This is the XL, thankfully without the bucket notch of the 3XL before it, and all at a much lower price, under £400. Now, the lower price was achieved earlier this year by opting for plastic construction and no waterproofing, and there's a lower spec chipset, Snapdragon 670. You lose the Qi charging, but it keeps the same much acclaimed single camera system and stereo speakers. 64 gig of storage, plus Google put the 3.5mm audio jack back into a Pixel. Yay! As usual for Pixels, you have to factor in the 3 years of monthly updates, adding to the long-term value proposition. To be honest, sub £400 is the price bracket the other Pixels should have been in too, in my opinion. The 3A and the 3A XL seem just right. As usual, you can't argue at the suitability of an iPhone for the man in the street. There's little to go wrong, and there's an Apple store hopefully not too far away if they get into trouble. The 11 is the new sweet spot, a perfect size for the majority. £730, but buyers are more likely to pick this one up on contract, I think, so it'll be a normal amount per month. There are relatively few spec compromises from the high-priced 11 Pro flagships. Principally, the main stabilised camera and the wide-angle shooter are the same. The chipset is identical, the screen is very nearly as good, the battery life is excellent, you get the same good Face ID, and the size is just right. This was my top pick back in May, and it's still a cracking phone from Samsung, now down well under £500. Not too big, with a great capacitive fingerprint sensor that works 100% of the time and lightning fast, unlike the ultrasonic uncertainty on the other S10s and the Note 10s. You get almost all the usual Samsung goodies too, an insanely good screen, screaming processor, loud and clear stereo speakers, expandable memory via standard microSD, 3.5mm headphone jack, blazing charging speeds, full water and dust proofing, and much more. Phew! The camera's excellent, plus there's a wide angle lens too. All you're missing is telephoto, as on the iPhone 11 just mentioned. As usual, it's Samsung's take on Android, and there's quite a bit to tone down. Bixby button, navigation button order, and a shuffle around in order to streamline the user experience, but it's worth it. But at number 1, you'll have guessed from Phone Show 382 that in terms of hardware, I just can't look past the iPhone 11 Pro shooting this at the moment. Summarising the proposition for a, quote, phone-sized phone, i.e. a compact, you've got arguably the highest quality triple camera, the best microphones with the lowest noise floor, class-leading stereo speakers, no questions best battery life, possibly the clearest screen plus foolproof Face ID. It's the most high quality tech you can squeeze into a compact phone body. And for once, I actually do believe that Apple didn't have room for a 3.5mm jack. Now, I've covered iOS versus Android in the past, and to my surprise as a die-hard Android user at the time, in Phone Show 360 I had to conclude, reluctantly, that iOS came out on top, just. And the iPhone 11 Pro here ships with iOS 13, bringing full-on dark mode for its AMOLED screen, a file system of sorts, plus a swipe keyboard that works almost as well as Google's. It's as if Apple's research guys got together and made a bullet list of 10 things to keep Steve Litchfield happy, and then they did almost all of them. At a price, of course. But it's an investment I can recommend. Oh yes, something new to review, and in this case thanks to Richard Yates for helping out with this one. He loves experimenting with cutting-edge phones with zoom cameras, and this Mi Note 10 is rather unique, at least until the Samsung Galaxy S11 Plus arrives in a few weeks' time. A 108 megapixel main camera backed by a 2x lens for portraits, a 5x lens for actual zoom, at least in good light, and wide angle and macro lenses, plus laser autofocus and everything stabilised. It's quite the camera monster. No xenon flash though, sadly. And the camera system is really rather the highlight, at least the main lens and sensor are. The 27 megapixel unzoomed shots have stunning detail in all light conditions, right up there with the best in the world today, and arguably superior because of the resolution. See some of the samples here. See my AAWP coverage if you want to grab JPEGs to analyse yourself. And there's a 108 megapixel camera mode too. You thought this shot was a regular snap? No, it's a small part of this single 108 megapixel image. Amazing. All super interesting. Now, Xiaomi makes a big thing in the camera setup screens of try 50 times zoom, perhaps trying to compete with Huawei's similar hybrid zoom, but it's just as unusable for real-world photos. The results are far too blocky and uncertain. Still, 4 times zoom is very crisp. Yes, I said 4 times because of the upsampled 5 times lens here, which equates to it kicking in at 4 times in the camera user interface. Keep up at the back. All a bit confusing, but it's fair to say there's a lot to play with here, and I'm sure Xiaomi will upgrade the camera processing and interface in due course. Away from the super interesting, if erratic, imaging, there's less to comment on here than you might think. It's made by Xiaomi, so I wasn't expecting stereo speakers or Qi charging or waterproofing, none of which seem to be priorities in China, and they are indeed absent. The single mono speaker is unspectacular. This is full volume. It's all a bit middly. So this is really only a media device if you plug in headphones. And yes, there's a 3.5mm jack. Hooray! Output isn't that loud, but the chipset DAC is high quality, so well done Xiaomi on the wired front. Xiaomi often skimps on NFC too, but that's here for Google Pay in conjunction with an in-screen fingerprint scanner. That's, well, it's usable. It's still a good second slower than capacitive scanners on older phones or the instant Face ID on the Pixel 4 series or any iPhone in recent years. I should perhaps mention the price at this point. Having seen the monster camera specs and given the presence of an even bigger monster, a 5,260 milliampere battery with 30-watt charging, I suspect you'll be thinking £700 upwards. I know I was. No, this is just £330, brand new, imported from the likes of GearBest. It's arriving officially in the UK next year, I believe, and hopefully not that much more expensive, but stunning value for what you get. Partly explaining the price, a Snapdragon 730G isn't top end, but it's easily fast enough, backed by 6GB of RAM and an unexpandable 128GB of storage. And with a 6.5-inch 1080p notched AMOLED screen that's rather tasty too. As you'd expect, it's Xiaomi's MIUI on top of Android, in this case MIUI 11 on Android 9. I couldn't find anything about an Android 10 update in the works, but I'd expect Xiaomi to consider it if they sell enough of these. But as ever with Xiaomi, it's a bit of a lottery update-wise. I'm optimistic. And I can live with MIUI on the whole. It just needs some taming and then some judicious home screen icon juggling. Every now and then something interstitial pops up which delivers a what? Moment. Plus it took me ages to find the way to switch the navigation buttons the right way around here. Discoverability is definitely an issue. But I had no show-stopping issues. I was browsing and snapping and sharing and watching, and all the usual things I do on a smartphone, especially taking pictures in this case. The Mi Note 10 is all about having a super solid and heavy phone with an experimental super camera. I absolutely see why Richard bought it, although given that the 108 megapixel sensor is made by Samsung, I think I'd like to see what Samsung can do with it in their own hardware, with even better optics and even better image processing. The S11 Plus should be something special, albeit at a much higher price. But £330 for this, it's a steal and great fun.